Listen, there are a lot of podcasts about the Black church in the vein of Larry Reed and King Jives.
Yikes.
But if you're looking for a podcast about the Black church that's thoughtful, informative, substantive, stimulating, then you need to subscribe to Black Church Chats. That's right. I need you to hit that subscribe button and then also hit the notification bell so that you'll know every time we go live. All right, on to the show. On the stage, there we go. I'm on the stage before we start. And then somehow, some way, after the intro music rolls, it kicks me off the stage. I don't know why it's doing that, but nonetheless, I'm here. We're here. Hello. Happy Tuesday to you. I hope you and yours are well. I see Mom Myrtle. My Mom Myrtle, that's mom number 2. She's here. Look at this. My sister Rochelle is putting everybody on blast. My sister Rochelle says, Pastor, I'm sorry to report there is one like, and that's mine. Your viewers need to do better. Put them on blast, Sister Rochelle. Let them know that we need to get more likes, because the more likes we get, the better it is for the algorithm. So it's up to my dear sister Rochelle, to my aunties who are here. The faithful are here this afternoon. My aunties Melissa and Millicent are here. Hello to both of you. And man, I am so excited to be on. My voice, you could tell my voice is a little messed up. Hasn't fully recovered from preaching on Sunday. Y'all know when I preach, I get into it. I get very emotional when I preach. The word hits me in the same way that it hits the people. And so I give it all. I give it all I can. And sometimes I fail to push from my diaphragm, and I go straight from my throat. And when I holler from my throat, this is what happens subsequently. So my voice is a little rough, but we gonna make it through nonetheless. I'm happy that you guys are here. I'm excited to have this conversation. Go Dodgers. The Dodgers won the World Series. So go Dodgers. I'm not a big baseball fan, but I am an LA fan. Go Dodgers. And additionally, let me ask you this question. Have you voted? Did you vote? Don't you be listening to me without voting. If you haven't voted, shame on you. Go vote. Some consequential legislation, some things on the ballot that we need to lean into and pay attention to. So if you haven't voted, there's still time, at least here in LA. And you know, in LA, we've got Prop 50 on the ballot. So the people that listen to Black Church Chats need to be voting people. That's right, voting people. My sister Melody's child in key is here. Hey, sister, how are you? God bless you. Yes. So listen. Let's have a conversation today. And this is a conversation that we have been having really since the death of Charlie Kirk. I mean, I've touched on race prior to Charlie Kirk's death. I've discussed the origins of race as a social construct. We're not new to this discussion on this channel, but I never thought in a million years I would spend as much time on this subject as I have since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. As a matter of fact, this is what I wrote today on my Facebook page. I wrote, when I first began podcasting consistently, I never imagined I'd be delving so deeply into the origins of race and racism on my channel. My original intent was to focus on issues related to the flourishing of the Black church. I knew the history of race would come up along the way, but I never thought I'd dedicate multiple episodes specifically to unpacking how race was constructed and why Christians must develop a more faithful theology and praxis around it. But after the death of Charlie Kirk and the resurgence of Christian nationalism, I began to notice the most vile, unbiblical, and hateful narratives about race reemerging within the MAGA movement. And you're going to see in just a second, that's not just my opinion. but you're gonna hear from a prominent voice within the MAGA movement, somebody that supported Donald Trump, co-signed exactly what I'm saying to you right now. But I continue. Racists and white supremacists are crawling out of their basements and crevices. Their voices amplified within the mainstream of the Trumpian party, and I specifically call it the Trumpian party because this ain't Reagan's Republican Party. All right, what exists today is not Republicanism as we knew it. Reagan, Bush Senior, Bush Jr. This is wholly, completely different. This is a cult of personality. This is what I call the Trumpian party. All right, fueled by Trump's ideologies. Right. I continue. They're being aided and abetted by a sympathetic president and virulently racist social media influencers. I'm convinced that these forces are setting their sights on dismantling the hard-won symbols and protections of Black freedom, such as the MLK holiday, Juneteenth, the Civil Rights Act, and the Voting Rights Act. Listen. I am not saying this prophetically. I do not consider myself to be a prophet. I just consider myself to be observant. I see the writing on the wall, and if you don't see it, you really need to wake up. They're going to come after the MLK holiday. Trump has already removed the bust of MLK from the national, what is it? The National Rotunda. I think that's what it's called, right? Rotunda. So MLK's bust has been removed. They're coming after the MLK holiday. They're coming after Juneteenth. As a matter of fact, they wouldn't even acknowledge Juneteenth, this past Juneteenth that just passed in this summer. They wouldn't even acknowledge it. As a matter of fact, they said, well, this is a day that Americans should be working. And the press secretary, Trump's press secretary said, I'm here at work today and all Americans need to be working today. So they're going to come after Juneteenth. They're already coming after settled history as expressed in the National African-American Museum in D.C. So Trump is already, removing artifacts from that museum. They're coming after the Civil Rights Act. They're coming after the Voting Rights Act. Charlie Kirk was no fan of MLK or the Civil Rights Act. And so this is happening. If you're not tuned in, and I don't mean to be alarmist, okay? And if you know me and if you know my temperament, I don't chase ambulances. I don't. I'm not a boogeyman type dude. Boo. There's a creature, a monster hiding behind every corner. I'm not that guy. Okay. But I am someone that looks, watches, observes. I intake news from the right. I intake news from the left. And then I also listen to more independent sources like Straight Arrow News and Justin Giboney's podcast. By the way, Justin Giboney's new book is out. You need to go grab Justin Giboney's new book. The name of his book is by me right now. Rochelle, if you could Google that book and drop the name and the link in chat, get Justin Giboney's book. But I'm observing what's happening, and it is abundantly clear that they are going after settled law, and they are going after symbols of Black freedom and progress. I continue. I've come to realize that the work of dignifying Black people, which has always been at the heart of the Black church's mission, is as urgent now as ever. False narratives must be corrected, shallow arguments dismantled, and a robust biblical anthropology boldly asserted against every distortion. This, I believe, is one of the critical callings of the Black church in our time. So I wrote that because I was just kind of thinking about how, I guess you can say that my channel is, hey, Mom Myrtle, I guess you can say that my channel is sort of reactive in this way, that I am reacting to what I've been seeing unfolding, but I'm reacting intentionally. I'm reacting purposefully, and I am reacting prophetically to call it out and to help others to see what is happening in our country, and to really beat the drum and ring the bell. Hey, if you are a leader within the Black church, like this is a problem. This is an issue. We need to address this, and we need to intentionally seek to dignify Black people and Blackness in light of all that's been happening in our country. And as I mentioned, I do have a co-signer today. I have an unlikely person that agrees with everything that I'm saying. This person that I'm about to show you, that I'm about to play, is also reading the tea leaves. This person is a Trump supporter, but he's seeing personalities like Nick Fuentes being mainstreamed, being platformed by Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. This is a guy who was once relegated to like the basement of the Republican Party, if even the basement. Like he was outside in the rain, even within the Republican Party. Now he's being mainstreamed, and so I'm just so that you'll know, I'm not the only one seeing this turn. I want to introduce you to a gentleman by the name of Ben Shapiro. Some of you guys know who Ben Shapiro is. Ben Shapiro is a conservative right-wing commentator and influencer, hardcore Trump supporter, but he's also Jewish. And he is seeing the resurgence of overt racism. He is seeing white supremacy on the rise again at the highest levels of government and within sort of Republican social media spaces. He comments in this clip about Tucker Carlson bringing Nick Fuentes on his show. If you don't know who Nick Fuentes is a self-proclaimed racist and white supremacist. He is a Nazi. He leads a movement called the Groypers movement. All right. And he was invited by Tucker Carlson on that show, and they spent 3 hours where Tucker Carlson essentially fawned over him. Tucker Carlson, listen, there isn't a more mainstream name in Republican conservative circles than Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson brings Nick Fuentes on. He's chummy buddy with Nick Fuentes. This is after Nick Fuentes is on Candace Owens' platform. And so Ben Shapiro is seeing this, and this is what he says. Listen to this.
Is the fragmentation of the political right. That fragmentation is being caused purposefully by a splinter faction of people led by a young man named Nick Fuentes. They call themselves the Groypers. They are white supremacists. They hate women, Jews, Hindus, many types of Christians, brown people of a wide variety of backgrounds, blacks, America's foreign policy, and America's Constitution. They admire Hitler and Stalin. And that splinter faction is now being facilitated and normalized within the mainstream Republican Party. The main agent in that normalization is Tucker Carlson, who is an intellectual coward, a dishonest interlocutor, and a terrible friend. And Tucker Carlson last week was aided, abetted, celebrated for normalizing Nazism within the Republican Party by the mainstay organization of the traditional right, the Heritage Foundation.
So did you hear what he said? Tucker Carlson brings Nick Fuentes on his platform, gives Nick Fuentes access to hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, rather than the Heritage Foundation, which is a leading organization on the right, rather than them denouncing Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes. They essentially support Nick Fuentes' presence on Tucker Carlson's platform. We saw this lack of moral clarity with even the vice president of the United States, when all of those messages were leaked, the young Republicans' messages were leaked, and they were saying vile things about black people, vile things about women, just awful, horrible, vile things. The vice president of the United States essentially said, well, they're just kids. Now, they weren't kids. These are people in their 30s, 40s, all right? But they're just kids, excusing the behavior. This is being normalized. Within Trump's America, within the MAGA movement, white supremacy is absolutely resurgent. Again, my friend and brother, Matthew Pridgen. Now, if you don't know who Matthew Pridgen is, Matthew Pridgen is a white man who supported Trump in 2016. He had been a Republican all his voting life. And then he did some ministry in inner city Charleston, South Carolina. And he began to see the inequities and the disparities. And he realized, whoa, like something is wrong. Something is deeply wrong with Trumpism and the Republican Party. Something is going on here. What's up, Shotty Mills, my sister? Matthew Pridgen has since gone on to direct and produce a documentary that I think is coming out later on. I think this documentary is coming out later on, either this month or next month, but it's called Sins of the Father, where he's talking about the history of race in this country. He's repudiating Trump and Trumpism and all of the lunacy coming out of the MAGA movement. And his influence is growing on social media, and I'm praying that his influence continues to grow. He's a Christian brother, loves the Lord, loves Jesus, and he does this as a ministry out of his love and affinity, not just for people, but for Jesus. And so this is what he said, and I think he sums this up well. This is Matthew Pridgen.
Okay, so Trump has been in office for 9 months now, and just think about how much race has played into his presidency so far. 1, he blamed a plane crash on DEI before knowing who the pilot was. 2, he has sent his lawyers to museums to vet not all of the exhibits, but just the exhibits specifically on slavery. 3, he quietly removed the MLK bust from the Oval Office. 4, he has made racial profiling into official government policy, allowing ICE officers to stop people just because they have brown skin. 5, he has blown up 64 people on boats who also happen to have brown skin. He's not blowing up European boats. 6, he has all but halted our very popular refugee program except for white South Africans. 7, he has raided inner cities in the middle of the night with Black Hawk helicopters. 8, he has cut food stamps and Medicaid after a 40-year effort started by Reagan to tie those programs to black and brown people in order to vilify the social safety net, even though more benefits go to white people than any other group. And 9, he has cut trillions of dollars in taxes for rich white guys. And he's doing it all in the name of a brown-skinned Palestinian Jew named Jesus. So the next time you blame us for making it all about race, remember that Trump already has.
So did you hear what he said? Because often the charge is we view everything through a racial lens. We can't help but to talk about race because we are racial idolaters. Well, if you look at all of my broadcasts before Charlie Kirk's assassination, you'll see I was moving full speed ahead, talking about things pertaining to the black church, not really dealing directly with race, the origins of race, things of that nature. Y'all are doing this. And by y'all, I mean MAGA movement, Trumpians, you guys have elected a man who is a white supremacist himself. He has emboldened white supremacists, and they are actively seeking to lurch America backwards to a time where Black people didn't have the rights we do today, to a time where language, vile, racist language, was normal and regular and expected. This is what's happening. And it's not just happening by unbelievers. So Nick Fuentes claims to be a Catholic, but we see the Christian nationalist movement with Doug Wilson and Joel Webbin and Save and what's that guy's name? Hey, Joshua Hames. And, you know, so this is unbelievers, believers, professing believers joining together to push a white supremacist agenda and to ensure that racism wins the day and becomes normalized once again. And so I've had to be reactive. I've had to respond to what I'm seeing. I've had to kind of pause and pivot and discuss these things because it's necessary. It's necessary because we're living in this very racialized climate. Y'all are the ones that donated $500,000 to a woman that called a 5-year-old Black autistic girl the N-word. Y'all know about that, right? Y'all saw that go viral, right? This white lady calls a 5-year-old autistic Black girl the N-word. As a result, she loses everything. She loses her job. She's canceled, rightfully so. They start a GoFundMe for this woman, and they raise $500,000 for her. And so this is the climate that we're in. We've always said there's a racism problem in America. We've always said there's a racism problem in white evangelicalism. We've always said there's a racism problem with American evangelicalism. We were ignored, we were shunned, we were marginalized, we were castigated, we were ostracized. And now guess what? They're coming out the cellars, they're coming out the basement. They now have a sympathetic president. And here we are. And as somebody who pastors Black people, loves the Black church, I can't just ignore what's happening. Got to speak into it, got to lean into it, and that's what we're going to do today. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about Blackness and we're going to talk about whiteness. Because part of the problem, y'all, part of the problem, thank you, baby. That's wifey here. Proud of my boldness. Thank you. If you're proud of me, then that's all that matters. That's it. That's all that matters. That's all the affirmation I need. Part of the problem, y'all, is that people really do not understand, particularly evangelicals, Americans in general, don't really understand the history of race. They don't get it. And their leaders and their influencers and their talking heads, some of them intentionally, some of them unintentionally, keep them uninformed. They don't want them to know. All they want them to do is parrot old tired talking points when race is brought up, but they don't want them to know the deep and the sordid history of race and racism in this country. Some of these MAGA social media influencers, they don't know the history of race themselves, so they are unintentionally keeping their people ignorant. But some of them do know, and they are intentionally keeping their people ignorant because when people know better, they do better. You have a lot of MAGA talking heads that lead I want you to oh golly, I'm having these Wi-Fi problems and it's irritating. So y'all bear with me, y'all. These Wi-Fi problems are going to drive me nuts. I want you to hear. Just another voice of miseducation and ignorance amongst the myriad of other voices. He happens to be a black man. But this is what I'm looking for the clip, y'all. This is what MAGA people, conservative people, white and black, this is what they get when they tune into Kevin Briggins, and Kevin Briggins dares to bring up issues of race, whiteness, and blackness. Listen to this.
I've said many times that in many ways to be black is to be Marxist. When they say you're not truly black, that's what they mean. You know, blackness is Marxism, right? It is Marxism wrapped in a package in which black people are willing to accept, right?
So you hear that? Listen, blackness is Marxism. So blackness is Marxism, according to the Briggins. So those who listen to him, the overwhelming majority, MAGA supporters, MAGAites, right? Listen to this, though. Listen to this. Look, Shotty's like, what? Shotty's like, what? Listen to this, though. It gets worse. Listen to this.
They say we need to tear down whiteness. What they're talking about is Christianity. They're using these code words because they can't say we want to tear down Western civilization. They're going to say, no, we want to tear down white supremacy. We want to tear down whiteness. What they really mean is Christianity, or the Christian foundation of Western society, because all the cultural norms must be torn down.
So according to Kevin Briggins, blackness is Marxism, whiteness is Christianity. And this is what some people consider Kevin Briggins to be an informed prognosticator. This is what they get when they try to have discussions around race. This is what they get. It's what they get. And notice Marxism, right? That's a starting point. Marxism, communism, socialism. Marxism, communism, socialism. Instead, though, if you're going to be informed about race, and if you're going to be informed about the history of race, you have to go back before Marx, before Stalin, before Gramsci, and you have to go to the root, to the root of it all. And when you go to the root of it all, you discover that blackness is not Marxism and whiteness is not Christianity. I created a PowerPoint that I just kind of want to walk through. Okay. Now, as I said, I've dealt with some of this already on this channel. I'm going to continue to talk about it. I think it's a important discussion because we need to get the narrative right. We need to get the story right. How can we ever seek to become a less racist society if we don't understand how deeply and how utterly we've all been impacted by racism, how pernicious and pervasive racism is. We have to go back to the beginning of this, y'all. If we're ever going to make it right. Because what's been happening around race since the 15th century has been wrong. And people like Kevin Briggins and Chad O. Jackson and Virgil Walker and Joel Webbin, Brian Salve, Doug Wilson, they're just contributing to the wrongness. They are intensifying the wrongness. They are exacerbating the wrongness. All because they either intentionally or unintentionally misrepresent the history. And they don't actually address it. Instead, they erect tired boogeymen to keep people locked into false narratives. So let's and like I said, I've done this before on this channel. I think it's important. Today, though, I'm going to go a step further, and I'm not just going to talk about the history of race, but I'm also going to talk about how we can finally begin to undo some of the harm that's been done, undo some of the racial trauma that's been perpetrated. So, those in the know, those that are informed, we understand the categories of white and black emerged in the early modern period. So we're looking at like 16th through the 18th centuries, especially within colonialism and Atlantic slavery. So let's talk about the 16th century. Okay? And even the 15th century. And these papal bulls issued by Rome, the doctrine of discovery. All right, let's talk about how Portugal and Spain, how they were authorized to conquer, quote unquote, non-Christian people. Now we know that Christianity was already in Africa, certainly in Northern Africa, also in West Africa as well. Mansa Musa has a statement about Christians in Mali and the region of Takar. So Christianity was already there. However, the Roman Catholic Church, through papal bulls, essentially paved the way for racialized dehumanization. You have the limpieza de sangre, purity of blood in Spain. So what that was is Jews and Muslims were converting to Christianity. They wanted to distinguish between those that were quote unquote truly Christian, wink wink, European, and those that had converted that weren't of the right blood. And so they codified this into legal policy, limpieza de sangre, purity of blood, to differentiate between those that were quote unquote truly Christian, aka European, and those that were converts from what they considered to be mongrel people. Then, of course, you have the early Portuguese encounters in Africa. All right, Gomez de Zurara going throughout the African continent, chronicling what he saw, and essentially lumping these Africans from different tribes, different cultures, different countries into one bucket, black, and labeling them, dehumanizing them, essentially saying that all of these people, because of the color of their skin, they are less human. So 15th, 16th centuries, this is what's going on. Then you move to the 17th century. Okay, so you have the European colonies now in the Americas created laws that gradually defined enslaved Africans as a separate hereditary class. So you have the Virginia slave codes, where essentially, if you were a child born to a black mother, you simply because you are black and your mother is black, you are property. So slavery becomes hereditary. And listen, let me say this. Let me just say this. Uh-oh, I removed myself. I want to remove this. Let me say this real quick. Listen to me. There is no justification whatsoever for chattel slavery, American chattel slavery. None. There are these viral clips out there where these Christian nationalist pastors claim that, you know, there's some justification that the Bible condones slavery, that it's not a sin to own people, things of that nature. There is no biblical justification for American chattel slavery. Anybody with an ounce of biblical knowledge understands that the system of American chattel slavery was unbiblical, wicked, sinful to the bone. And so if you were participating in it or condoning it, you were biblically illiterate, and you most likely were not a Christian. You were not a Christian. Here's why. We just saw it with these slave codes. American chattel slavery was unique. It was a unique form of slavery because, number one, it was built upon man stealing. And we know Exodus 21, 1 Timothy 1 condemns man stealing, enslavers that kidnap people for the purpose of enslaving them. So that's number one. Number two, American chattel slavery became race-based. Slavery prior was about like if your country conquered another country, right, then you know, as the conquering country, you'd be able to enslave those you conquered. It was indentured, right? If you owed a debt, right, you could agree to serve for a specific time, right? However, American chattel slavery specifically was race-based. These people, these black bodies, they are fit to be chattel simply because they're black, simply because they have black skin. Number three, American chattel slavery was lifelong. Lifelong. That was the policy. Now, yes, we know that some received their freedom, some were able to buy their freedom, but as a system, you could own enslaved people for life without any prospect. And many, 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 many black people died. Born into chattel slavery, died as enslaved people. And it was also hereditary. There's no, if you understand how slavery was conducted even in the Old Testament, and certain prohibitions and ways in which Israel was to engage in this system, then you understand that there is no type of biblical support, no biblical data that could in any way, shape, or form support American chattel slavery. But I digress. Let me add this back to the stage. So you have the Virginia slave codes, okay? You have Bacon's Rebellion. So if you're not familiar with Bacon's Rebellion, then you really need to research this. This is very interesting. Had the rich ruling class in Virginia. And then a man named I think his name was Nathaniel Bacon, if I'm not mistaken. He comes to the Virginia colony, and he sees that. Now I want to tell this story correctly, because sometimes in the retelling of this, indigenous people are thrown under the bus. And their territories, their land being encroached upon. All right, and so they were attacking settlers because they were stealing their land and essentially displacing them. But nonetheless, I digress. You have indentured Virginia government. We can create a militia, and they do that. Bacon, with indentured Africans and Europeans, they create an interracial militia. Europeans, Africans together to fight indigenous people. Well, the militia grows and grows and grows and grows, and ultimately Bacon is able to overthrow the Virginia government. He burns Jamestown to the ground, y'all. Bacon does. Burns Jamestown to the ground. And he actually seizes power. Bacon seizes power along with this interracial coalition. And then Bacon dies of dysentery. And the former leader, I think his name was either Berkeley or Baxter. I can't remember the name, but the man, the rich landowner, he comes back into power. He hangs over 20 people that fought alongside of Bacon. And then what happens is he says, okay, I have to ensure that that an interracial insurrection can never happen again. And so here's what I'm going to do. I am going to codify into law the marginalization of Black people, and I'm going to empower their poor white counterparts in mistreating them and abusing them simply because they're black. And I'm going to codify this into law. And so this is what happens. Rights and laws are stripped from the black population, and rights are given to poor. They're disenfranchised and they're relegated further to the margins. And this form of government spread throughout the colony, from Virginia throughout the colony. And so we have in this instance, my volume went really low. Can y'all hear me? Let me know if y'all hear me. Chris is saying that my volume went really low. Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me? Sound is chopping. Golly. I'm freezing up? No. No, hello. Am I back, y'all? Can y'all hear me? Tag on it. You can barely hear me? Oh, no. Hold on. Oh, no. Is this better? Is this better? Can y'all hear me? Hello? 1 2 1 2. Is this better? Can y'all hear me? Barely hear me. God. I don't know what's wrong, y'all. I don't know what's wrong. Hold on, let me do this. 1 second. How about now? Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me? Is this better? I took the mic off. Can y'all hear me? Is this better? Can y'all hear me? Better? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up, thumbs down. That's way better? Okay. All right. So we're gonna set the mic to the side. Okay. All right. Yeah, listen, when let me tell y'all, when I talk, I spit a lot. And that spit is going directly into the mic. All right, y'all. I'm a Baptist preacher, y'all. When I talk, the rain falls, and the rain, it's indiscriminate, and so a lot of spit is getting into that mic, and I'm certain I'm damaging the mic. But nonetheless, we're here, and I'm back, and y'all can hear me. So let me hasten. So I gave you kind of a synopsis of Bacon's rebellion. But you can see this if you study it out yourself. You will see this as a major event. That's what you get the way you're 49. Listen. Go Niners. I'm sorry we had to do that to you, but that's just what we do. That's just what we do. All right, so you guys can go research Bacon's rebellion, but this is a big shift, y'all. This is one of the ways that race, and the construct of race was perpetuated in the colonies and later in the country. Okay. And then you have English natural philosophy and the Bible. Essentially, these rebellions need to be advertised much more wide. Yes. And I know you know about the rebellions. I know, Dr. Ash, but people need to learn about Bacon's rebellion and how that rebellion led to the hardening of racialized categories in the colonies and subsequently in America. So absolutely. So again, English natural philosophy and the Bible. So you have race becoming theologized through the curse of Ham. And so this is an example. This is an example of what's going on, the developments. Thank you, Dr. Ash. Thank you. All right. Then we move forward to the 18th century. 18th century. So you have the Enlightenment, scientific racism. You have Carl Linnaeus. I've talked about this. All right. You have all this pseudoscience, and they love categories, y'all. Right? They love to kind of classify human beings, and they love to further lean into this false construct of race. They do. So in 1735, right, Linnaeus comes along and he divides humanity into 4 varieties. You have Homo europaeus, characterized as governed by laws and inventive. Homo americanus, they're obstinate, regulated by customs. Homo asiaticus, severe, governed by opinion. And guess how he characterizes Homo Africans, black folks, y'all? Lazy, governed by caprice. So these were moral and behavioral traits falsely mapped onto physical characteristics, y'all. And then you have Blumenbach, who coins the term Caucasian, creates this hierarchy of beauty. And guess who's at the top of the hierarchy? White people. So this is a graphic that I created. I think is helpful. Okay. As a matter of fact, I was in the Bay the week before last. Was it last week or the week before last? I don't know when, but I was there. And a gentleman came up to me and he was like, "Man, your buckets, when you talked about the buckets, that really helped me. I think this is a good visual to understand this construction." So you have 2 buckets, blackness and whiteness, again, created over centuries, right? Particularly during the colonial period. By the time America becomes a thing, this is like these constructs are in full swing. Thomas Jefferson writes about the inferiority of the black race. But you have these 2 false constructions, blackness and whiteness. So no, Kevin Briggins, blackness is not Marxism. The category of blackness existed before Marx. And Kevin Briggins' whiteness, you are perpetuating incorrect stereotypes and racialized narratives when you conflate Christianity and whiteness. Listen, let me let you hear Briggins again.
When they say we need to tear down whiteness, what they're talking about is Christianity. They're using these code words because they can't say we want to tear down Western civilization. They're going to say, no, we want to tear down white supremacy. We want to tear down whiteness. What they really mean is Christianity, or the Christian foundation of Western society, because all the cultural norms must be torn down.
So you see how he conflates Christianity and whiteness? So this is the image, I think, kind of helps people to see what happened over centuries as these constructs, whiteness and blackness, were created and ultimately codified into law, media, education, et cetera. So you have the invention of blackness and the invention of whiteness, pictured as buckets on the slide. So you have the black bucket that's created and the white bucket that's created. And then characteristics are placed into the buckets. In the black bucket, these are the characteristics they placed into the black bucket: inferior, savage, lazy, criminal, dependent, little to no rights, hypersexualized, all of this and more. They created the bucket, and then they filled the bucket with these lies. They filled the bucket with these inaccuracies. And then they created the whiteness bucket. Because prior to whiteness, people were Italian and German and insert European country here. Then whiteness is created, and you have people from Europe assimilating into this category. And in this bucket, characteristics like civilized, rational, superior, property owner, invested with rights, honorable, and Christian. Now, if you notice, these two buckets are on top of a table. These two buckets were created as a way to support and further the flourishing of certain ideals and institutions. So you have colonialism, slavery, and hierarchy. This is at the foundation. We want to enslave people. And we don't want to deal with the pushback that's going to come along with enslaving only Black people. So one of the reasons why we have to create the black bucket and fill this black bucket with these things is because we want people to be okay with the institution of chattel slavery. So you see what's at the foundation? You have colonialism, the doctrine of discovery. Everything belongs to Europe, right? And so these constructs are then developed and placed upon the foundation. And they work in tandem. They work hand in hand. Now, these constructs have been codified into law. I just showed you the pseudoscience created around these constructs, culture as well, schooling, media. So essentially what's happened is they fill the buckets and then they pour what's in these buckets into these spaces. So now laws are created around what's in the bucket. Science is skewed to reinforce and support what's in the bucket. Culture is shaped by what's in the bucket. Schooling, you have whitewashed history to reinforce what's in the bucket. Media perpetuates and reinforces what's in the bucket. So when you start with Marxism, socialism, communism, you are either willfully or ignorantly ignoring all of this history prior to this that created these two buckets. And you're also overlooking either willfully or ignorantly what's in these buckets. Therefore, you have nothing to say to us about how to rectify this problem. As a matter of fact, all you're doing is pulling from one bucket or the other, rather than seeking to rectify what's in these buckets, correct what's in these buckets. You are pulling from these buckets to build your platforms, to create your narratives, and to miseducate your people. And so here are the common evangelical responses to these buckets. So these buckets exist, y'all. Okay? Let me talk about some common evangelical responses to these buckets. as pictured here on this slide, color blindness. Oh, well, I don't see color. I don't see color. I don't. Okay, well, this picture displays what is evidently and obviously wrong with quote unquote color blindness. Because the buckets don't disappear just because you have a blindfold on. The buckets are still there. The buckets don't go away. And also, it's a lie. It's a lie, y'all. These people claiming to be colorblind, they're not. They claim to be colorblind while running up the numbers on podcasts and broadcasts created about quote unquote black culture. Oh, we don't see color, but let's talk about how bad black culture is. Let's disparage black culture. But we don't see color, though. We don't see color, but let's talk about black fatigue. So color blindness is often a ruse. It's not often a ruse. It's a ruse, which allows people to claim ignorance when in reality they absolutely do see color. And they absolutely and they absolutely respond and react to the color that they see, even as they claim to not see color. So that's one common evangelical response to race, color blindness. Let's talk about some others. And y'all, if you guys want to, you guys have been lighting up the comment section, and I love it. I love the fact that you guys are lighting up the comment section. If I miss some common evangelical responses to race, feel free to throw them in the comment section, y'all, because I don't claim to have all knowledge. I'm learning from you just like you guys are learning from me. And so here's another common evangelical response to race: cries of outrage. Y'all, the fragility is real. The fragility is real. Oh, you're being divisive. As a matter of fact, I guarantee once I hop off of here, somebody's going to stumble on this broadcast and they're going to say, oh, you're being divisive. But this is divisive. This is divisive. You want to know why this is divisive? Because you're willfully turning a blind eye. You're either willfully or ignorantly turning a blind eye to the real and actual problems that divide us. And you're pretending like these things don't exist. It's like telling somebody who has cancer that they have cancer, and then somebody stepping in saying, no, don't say that. Don't say that. You're going to hurt their feelings. Oh, come on, y'all. This is divisive. But a common evangelical response to race is the fragility kicks in, cries of outrage, you're being too political, you're being too divisive, so they can continue to either bulldoze over or tiptoe around the issue. Also, simplistic solutions, y'all. Solutions like just preach the gospel. Do we believe in preaching the gospel? Absolutely. But you have to understand that they were preaching the gospel as these buckets were being created, weren't they? Was the gospel lost during American chattel slavery? Right. Did we somehow recover the gospel after emancipation? Gospel has been preached. But what do we know, y'all? Faith without what? Works is dead. When it comes to advocating for pro-life causes, you don't hear just preach the gospel. You know what you hear? Get out, go stand in front of abortion mills, right? Get out and have conversations with women contemplating having abortions, right? You don't hear, oh, you know what? We're just going to just preach the gospel. No. So you have simplistic solutions. Just preach as another way to tiptoe around the issue. Turning to tokens. Cognitive dissonance is real, y'all. And people would rather listen to somebody lie to them than actually confront the racism in their heart. And so you know what they do, y'all? They amass teachers like Virgil Walker and Chad O. Jackson and Kevin Briggins, and they amass these tokens, and they listen to these outliers for confirmation bias rather than actually leaning in and listening to people that will challenge their narratives. So what they'll do is they'll turn to tokens and they'll weaponize these tokens. And they'll say, well, Candace Owens said, Officer Tatum said, never mind the fact that voices like these are outliers. They do not reflect the collective voice of the African American community. We've always had outliers. And yes, Black culture is not monolithic. I get that. I understand. But we would be lying if we didn't acknowledge there is still a collective. You ask the overwhelming majority of Black people, they're going to tell you systemic racism, systemic injustice exists. You ask the overwhelming majority of Black people if policing in Black neighborhoods has been oppressive, they're going to say yes. So what a lot of evangelicals will do is they will turn down those voices, the overwhelming majority, and turn up the outliers, the tokens, for confirmation bias. And they'll reward those tokens with money, broader platforms, applause, recognition. And then, of course, demonize and stigmatize, Marxist, communists, throw those names, right, out there. And all of that is to essentially avoid this, y'all. To looking in those buckets. Avoid looking in those buckets and reckoning with this legacy and this history that still continues today. Listen, the reason why race is such a touchy subject in America is because, people don't want to feel like they're racist. It's a dirty thing. It's not a flattering thing. People don't want to really deal with the implications of these constructs and the existence of this construct called whiteness. Instead, they want to simplify it and caricature those of us having these conversations by essentially saying, when we use the word whiteness, we're referring strictly to white skin. And so that allows them to be fragile, that allows them to wave the flag and say foul on the play, because they are hearing the term whiteness and automatically thinking white skin, when as we've seen, as we've walked through this, whiteness is a construct. Blackness is a construct. And one bucket has been filled with, well, no. Actually, let me clarify. Both buckets have been filled with inaccuracies and lies. All right. So now here's where I'm at, y'all. And this is really kind of what I want to focus my ministry towards, this channel towards. Of course, I'm gonna still do non-race related, broadcasts. Like I'm not Black Church Chats is not becoming like, solely focused on talking about race and the origins. So no. That's not happening. However, I am going to talk about this more than I did at the inception of this channel. And again, I've been podcasting in earnest since April. And I feel the need to kind of pivot just a bit and address issues of race more because of all of the mess that's going on out there, the MAGA mess that's going on out there. But I want to be more of a solutions guy. Okay. We recognize the problem here. We understand it here. I'm hoping that others will find this channel and learn and step outside of their echo chambers and go beyond the Marxist, socialist, communist boogeyman and really dig deep into like the history behind this stuff. But those of us that are part of this community, like we get the history, right? Most of us, right? So solutions, right? How do we address the issue? Now, let me tell you, addressing the issue requires taking steps to rectify things interpersonally, but then also taking steps to rectify things socially, politically, governmentally, right? Because again, these buckets were created and they took the stuff in the buckets and codified the stuff in the law, right? This is where we now talk about systemic racism, systemic injustice. And if you want me to go through the ways in which the stuff's been codified into law, I can do that. I've done that on previous broadcasts. I'll do that again. But let me first address kind of the interpersonal things that we can do within community. Thank goodness there are over 50 one another passages in the New Testament. Now, listen, y'all. America has never really taken these passages seriously. I firmly believe that if we took these one another passages seriously, there would have been no chattel slavery in America. If the lawmakers and the quote unquote founding fathers took these passages seriously, this is why I don't rock with the whole, professing Christian slave owners. They had quote unquote cultural blind spots. And so, let's not question their Christianity because of their quote unquote cultural blind spot. Nah. There are clear prescriptive texts. You just read them. And you clearly see as you read them that the system of American chattel slavery is wicked. It's a violation of all of the one another passages. Romans 12:10, be devoted to one another in love. Romans 12:10, honor one another above yourselves. Romans 14:13, stop passing judgment on one another. This is just some of them. Ephesians 4:25, speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are members of one body. James 4:11, do not slander one another. Ephesians 5:21, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Philippians 2:3, in humility, Consider others more significant than yourselves. 1 Peter 4:10. Use whatever gift you have received to serve others. Again, I can go on and on and on and on and on and on with these one another passages. Had they been obeyed, American chattel slavery wouldn't have been a thing. Because enslaved people became Christians. Some of them came here as Christians. And so now all of this applies. If you're a professing Christian slave owner, then all of this applies to your professing Christian, quote unquote, property. Also, y'all, I've talked about this. I'm going to continue to talk about this. I may do a whole broadcast on this. And I know this isn't sexy. But this is a core part of the issue. A lot of racism and racial ignorance exists because a lot of evangelicals do not have a biblical anthropology. They don't. As a matter of fact, let me play this clip for you. And you'll hear this. You'll hear this. Listen to this clip. And this clip is a perfect example of a broken, unbiblical anthropology. Listen to this.
Today, for Black Christians, are you Christian first or Black first? Which one is it? And it's making an idol of your skin so you can separate yourselves from others when the whole point is that we are all supposed to come together as one race. And so my skin tone is just a feature. It's not who I am as a person. I am a follower of Christ, right? All this other stuff is just, just some accessory feature I have no control over. Why should I take pride in these things? What I take pride in is my relationship with Christ. That's what I am mostly in love with, not my skin tone.
So his body is just an accessory. His body is just cosmetic. Who cares? Doesn't really matter. His body is just somehow something that he was born into, but is inconsequential, doesn't really matter whatsoever. Now, Shadi, it's hitting the nail on the head. The Gnosticism that has engulfed Western anthropology plays a huge role in this. God cares about bodies. He cares about bodies. He cares about bodies. Your body is not just cosmetic, inconsequential, just some feature that just sort of is there but doesn't matter at all. This drives a lot of the ignorance around race, and it perpetuates this false colorblindness theory. Listen to this. This is in Romans 8, 10 and 11. But if Christ is in you, although the body, now this is a reference to the physical body, okay? Although the body is dead because of sin. So our physical bodies are decaying every day. Our physical bodies, as a result of the fall, right? We all will die physically, and every day we are getting closer to that fateful day, right? So Paul says, but if Christ is in you, although the body is dead because of sin, the spirit is life because of righteousness. If the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, listen, he who raised Christ Jesus from the dead, what will he do? He will also give life to what? Your mortal bodies. Through his spirit who dwells in you. The body is not to be ignored, not to be it's not just a cosmetic, superficial feature. What did God do in the beginning? Created man from what? The dust of the ground. Blew into him. And he became a living nephesh, soul, flesh, body, spirit, flesh, one man. God created and values a human body. God indwells human bodies. God cares for physical needs. Jesus' ministry demonstrated God's compassion for bodies. God commands bodily stewardship and holiness. God redeems and will resurrect the body. And so, of course, like having an inordinate amount of pride in your physical features, the phenotype, things of that nature. Of course, like this is not what I'm advocating for. But to essentially say none of this matters, it's just superficial, it's just whatever, is part of the problem. But this is what exists and it's what's prevalent out there. So we have to fix this. I'm gonna probably do a whole discussion on this. It's extremely important. And then y'all know this is a big text of mine. Y'all have heard me read this text. And I'm also gonna do a show on practical ways this can be applied. But you have to understand this particular text in light of the history of race, in light of what's been placed in the black bucket, what's been placed in the white bucket. You have to understand how to apply this text within the modern context. And I understand chapter 11. I understand we're talking about disparities at the table and things of that nature at the love feast. I'm talking about, right, like the application of the text. I understand the interpretation of the text. How does this text apply within our context as believers, interracial, cross-cultural believers, right? As we lean into and understand the history of race as a social construct, what's gone into the buckets, the fact that this still, these constructs, they still matter and they're still having an impact upon culture and society today. How do we apply this? 1 Corinthians 12, starting in verse 22. On the contrary, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And on those parts of the body that we think less honorable, we bestow greater honor. Verse 23 is so key. All of it is key, but listen to this and keep those buckets in mind. On those parts of the body that we think less honorable, we bestow the greater honor. And our unpresentable parts are treated with greater modesty, which our more presentable parts do not require. Think of those buckets. Listen to what Paul says. But God has so composed the body. Look at what God has done. Giving greater honor. Oh, this is DEI. This is what Paul says God has done. God has so composed the body, giving greater honor to who? To the part that lacked it. And why does God do this? Verse 25, that there may be no division in the body. It's actually divisive to ignore dishonor. It's actually divisive to pretend like parts of the body have not been dishonored and are not currently being dishonored. It's actually divisive to pretend like there's a level playing field. That's what's divisive. What we're doing here is not divisive. What we're doing here actually could lead and would lead to greater unity, right? It would lead to stripping away the false veneer of unity and really going deeper to achieve a substantive, actual, consequential unity. Because God has so composed the body, giving greater honor to the part that lacked it, that there may be no division in the body. Listen, but that the members have the same care for one another. So you have two parts of the body. One has been historically honored. One has been historically valued, and the other dishonored, devalued. Well, the prescription here is that the members, this sounds like equity. God wants the members to have the same care for one another. So if he doesn't want an inordinate amount of care to be heaped on this part of the body that's been historically honored and valued, while ignoring, obfuscating honor being shared and spread to this part of the body that has lacked it, that has been dishonored and devalued. He wants the same care, same honor. And then he goes on to say in verse 26, if one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. And then also, y'all, remember, these buckets have been spilled into law, science, culture, schooling, media. All of that has to be undone. Micah 6:8, and I'm over an hour now. I'm at about an hour and 30 minutes, so I'm gonna wrap up here. But I'll probably do individual shows like drilling down, because I don't just want this to be kind of nebulous, abstract. I want to put some meat on these bones. But yes, believers should do justice. So where we see these buckets spilled into law, science, culture, schooling, media, we want to rectify that. That's nothing to do with socialism, Marxism, communism. But it has everything to do with being truthful, rejecting lies, recognizing the harm that's been done, seeking to do no further harm. And this is where the rub is, right? Because a lot of our conservative friends, they only see racism as an individual problem, a problem within individual hearts. And they don't see how these buckets have been emptied into all of these spaces. And so a lot of them think all we need are more kumbaya moments, where we come together and cry, and that's racial reconciliation. But we're not seeking to address how these buckets have been spilled into all of these areas. Don't get me wrong, kumbaya is great, but these buckets, after we kumbaya, are still being poured out into all of these areas. And we need to hold hands over to the ballot box. We need to hold hands as we send emails to our legislators, like we need to hold hands to advocate against harmful racialized policies. All right, y'all. We're about an hour and 34 minutes in. And like I said, I'm going to be leaning into this more. I'm going to be doing more broadcasts on race, around race. I'm really praying that I'll be able to get Matthew Pridgeon on the show. I also see some conversation happening in the chat around Martin Luther King. Y'all, I'm actively trying to reach out to King scholars and to actual historians, because none of those guys are actual historians. And full disclosure, I'm not an actual historian either. Okay, I'm an amateur historian, and so I would love to get an actual historian with a PhD on the show to address a lot of the allegations being made about King. Again, y'all, these allegations aren't new. They've been around forever. None of this is new, guys. None of this is new. This is not. These aren't new developments, new charges, new accusations. But I am working on getting a King scholar, an actual historian on the broadcast. Actually, Damon and I have talked about it as well. And so, yeah, Black Church Chats is devoted to the flourishing of the Black church. And I think now more than ever, we need to lean into these conversations, because guess what's happening? Guess what's happening? They are seeking to take these buckets and add more lies into the buckets, right? And then to bring us back, to lurch us backwards into a time where, like, these buckets were just reality, and we accepted it, and it just is what it is. This is blackness and this is whiteness, and we're America. That's what's happening, and so we have to raise our voices against that. All right, y'all. I appreciate y'all so much. Y'all are phenomenal. Until next time, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel. And I may be on later this week. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, peace out. Appreciate y'all. Bye-bye.